They did this with taxes that were taken from like a nail factory that was 100 times more efficient than hand pounding all of these nails. And they may have put that factory out of business to send this few hundred people up on top of a mountain to make a ski lodge for people to take a vacation and go skiing in the middle of the Great Depression. Are you kidding me? Unemployment soars, deflation continues its plunge, and the rise in popularity of socialism continues. This first story, U.S. weekly jobs claims hit 4.4 million. Now, a couple of weeks ago, it was 6-point-something million. But this brings the 5-week total, so just the past 5 weeks, to more than 26 million people. Now, there's 330 million people in the United States. With all of the children and retirees and people that didn't have to work before, I would imagine that there were less than 260 million jobs. So this is way over the 10% mark that have filed in just the past 5 weeks. And, this is each week of filing claims, and they're falling. But these are cumulative. You have to stack them all on top of each other. And so over the past 5 weeks, 26.5 million. Now, that, though, does not include a lot of people that are self-employed. If you set up a corporation and you become an employee of your own corporation and you're using a payroll service, they'll pay into the unemployment insurance. It's part of your taxes. And the company has to pay these taxes. But a small entrepreneur, like I know somebody that just started a business making natural sunscreen. And her business was very small, but it was growing. And then she right now is basically unemployed. That business went away. She can't file for unemployment insurance. So not only does she not get the benefits, but she doesn't get included in these 26 million people. And a lot of self-employed people are not included in that. There's a lot of people that do things like, musicians that work for tips, artists and things like that. There's a lot of people out there that work for cash. And their income just completely went away. They have no fallback as far as unemployment insurance, but they also do not get it counted. So you could add at least 10%, but probably more like 15, maybe even 20% to this figure. I mean, it really is. This is huge. Getting onto the main page, gold and silver are both up. The things here about gold soaring, jobless claims. Joseph Stiglitz, Nobel Prize winning economist. U.S. on course for second Great Depression. I got news for you, Joe. It's going to be the greatest depression. It's going to be far worse than the Great Depression. Record jobless claims wipe out post-Great Recession employment gains. Eurozone economy suffers unprecedented collapse. Now, the Eurozone was a little bit ahead of us. If you recall, Italy and Spain were having a real crisis with the coronavirus before the U.S. was starting to even have its crisis. And so they had shut down their economies. And what we're seeing, there's this delayed result, and we're seeing an economic collapse going on in their economies. And I really want to say to all governments out there, the society that wins this thing is the society that can strike a balance between economic activity and the spread of the coronavirus. Yes, we have to suppress the spread of the coronavirus. We have to keep this from overwhelming our hospitals and our systems. But at the same time, if you shut down the economy and you cause future poverty, you will be responsible for many, many, many more deaths than the coronavirus. Not only does poverty shorten lifespans, but it increases infant mortality and just mortality in general because you don't have access to good health care and great nutrition. And you end up with a lot more anxiety and pressure. There's, this, what we're doing, we really need to strike that balance between economic activity and the coronavirus. And so for anybody out there that's watching this, I have been investing in what I saw as a safe haven. It was against economic crises, but it was also, it turned out that it was also against this coronavirus, the pandemic. So I was investing in what was a safe haven sector. And so I feel a little bit more comfortable. And I do have, with this, I'm not at the level of anxiety that I would imagine that tens of millions, hundreds of millions of people are feeling right now. I mean, I have some anxiety, but I have a feeling that a lot of other people have anxiety that's a lot worse. Their job went away, they don't have any income, and they didn't save anything. But if you've got a little extra capital, buy something that you look at this thing, how to survive this disruption in global supply chains. So global supply chains, if there's something that you wanted that you're not certain, are they going to be making that a year from now? Am I even going to be able to get it? Are any of the manufacturers that make that thing going to survive? So if you can, buy something. Go out and spend some money on something. Support some, I recently called up a local high-end audio store that I had been to because I used to be in that industry, and I bought a cabinet from them and a couple of other things from them. And I wanted to support them because it's not the type of business that's going to recover from this. And I'm hoping that they don't go out of business completely. I like having a variety available to me and a lot of stores there of all different goods and services. But I plan on having a ranch, and there I'm going to have a home theater, and I was planning on installing a nice projector and stuff like that. So I ordered a JVC projector from him recently. Even though his store is closed, I had his email address, emailed him personally, said, can you get me one of these mail order? So I wanted to support his profit margin, and so I ordered a JVC projector recently. I'm going to order some other things right now, but I've also been ordering a lot of stuff. I hate to see Amazon flourish from this, and they are. They just hired 100,000 people at the expense of all the other. As people get trained to use Amazon, they're just going to stop using a lot of retail stores, which I've already done because here where I live, a lot of stores are just so poorly managed that they have an item one week and then the next week they don't have it, and they may not have it for 6 months or whatever. They don't do good inventory control, and so you end up having to buy those things from Amazon, and you don't end up going back for that item. But if you can, support the economy by buying something. If you have any relationship with the government, if you have any influence with people that are making decisions, they're making short-term emotional decisions for a very long-term problem here, and they need to make these decisions based on data. And the decisions that they're making are taking us down a road toward poverty and a whole lot of death. This global container shipments set to fall 30% in the next few months. That is huge. This is global trade falling off a cliff. 30%, a one-third contraction basically in just the next few months. That's really big. On the radar. Thank you very much for taking the poll, by the way. A lot of you took it. And we asked 2 questions. Yes, conflict is coming. No, it's all hot air. And I want to thank the 41% of you that said I was full of hot air. I like feedback, whichever way it is. And the 59%, it's interesting, the majority does feel that what we're doing, it may not lead to war, but it's dangerous. All this stuff can be very dangerous. I want to welcome the 2,501 new subscribers. Just remember to hit that notification bell, and you'll get a notification just after the video comes out. If you want a notification an hour before, or you want it even if YouTube unsubscribes you or unnotifies you, you can get that by going to our website. Just scroll down to the bottom of the main page and you can put your email address right in there. And you'll get an email every day about an hour before the video comes out or something. It'll be before, not after. Charts of the day from Silver Watchdog. Next time someone tells you gold is a commodity, this is the Thomson Reuters Jefferies CRB, which is a commodities index, TVC. I didn't know what the TVC was, but this is their core commodities index. It's got either a different basket of commodities or a different weighting to the commodities that are in this index. And you can see that it's back to levels that it was at back in 1994, where gold is surging and acting very unlike the rest of the commodities. Now, I'm going to break this down. This is gold in dollars, and this is the core commodities index. I was used to watching just the CRB index, the regular commodities index. And so this is the CRB, just the Reuters Jefferies Commodities Index. And what I'm amazed at is it's back to levels. This goes back to about when I was born. I was born in February of 1956, and this starts right about then. And we're back to those levels. And this is the Arab oil embargo of the 70s, the first Arab oil embargo. And it passes on, this is monthly data. And so the price of oil goes up, but then that causes the price of a whole bunch of other things that are energy-intensive, mining and farming, and a whole bunch of things end up rising in price. And then there was a second Arab oil embargo. And then we went into the commodities winter, this brutal 20-year bear market. This coincides with the $140 peak in oil. And this coincides with oil, a few days ago going at one point minus $40 a barrel. So this is saying that, and this is just like 2 months of data here, this plunge. So this is just enormous deflation happening, and it's the wrong kind of deflation. Natural deflation, where you've got a fixed currency supply, but you get better and more efficient at producing things, so the cost of those things goes down very, very slowly over time. This constant creep of things getting less and less expensive, that's natural, that's good. This is a different type of deflation, and it's not good. Getting back to this again, this is gold, but it's gold measured in dollars. Now, what if you measured it in other currencies? Here's gold measured in the euro, and it's setting all-time record highs. And my guess is, gold right now, because of the strong dollar, gold is setting record highs in lots of currencies. And my guess is that if you put all of the world's currencies together and you put a value on them, that gold would be setting record highs right now. So gold really is setting record highs, and it's the dollar that's lying to you. Viewer feedback. I want to remind everybody, use this search tool. Whenever you've got a question, it's probably been answered, and you can find a very detailed answer by using this search tool. So from the video before last, Dennis got back to me. Hi, Mike, I was referring to the socialist programs in the New Deal, which seem to have averted a revolution since the socialist parties and communist parties and the CIO, which is I think it's the Congress of Industrial Organizations, were leaning on FDR. Later, this became the AFL-CIO, a labor union, basically. We're leaning on FDR to provide relief for millions of Americans that were unemployed during the depth of the Depression. And since then, the conservatives have chipped away at those programs and regulations to keep the banks from financially engineering themselves into trouble. The wealthy don't want us serfs rocking the boat. Ayn Rand would approve of our current course. I don't think you've read a lot of Ayn Rand, because she'd be rolling in her grave right now at what's going on. And it's interesting. If you look at I read an article about a year ago about the different lenses that people look through and the way that they sort of interpret the world. And if you understand these lenses, it makes you a little bit more compassionate for different schools of thought. And one of the things is that somebody that's from the left, they call themselves liberals, and I hate that, because you could call them progressives. I don't think it's a progressive thought, but liberal was stolen. That's a name that was stolen from the original liberals, which are now referred to as libertarians. They're people that would say, you can do anything you want with your life, live it any way you want, just leave me alone. And by the same token, I can live my life any way I want, and I'll leave you alone. So that was the original liberals. But modern liberals see the world through victim and oppressor lens. The conservatives see the world through this law and order lens. The military and the police versus the criminal. Libertarians such as me, I sort of see the world through the freedom and enslavement lens. But the victim and oppressor thing here, this says the wealthy don't want us serfs rocking the boat, as though the wealthy somehow got wealthy by capturing all the wealth at the expense of all of that all of the jobs exist and the wealthy get wealthy at the expense of the workers that they create jobs for and employ. And that thought really requires that there's this amount of wealth that's already out there that's a static quantity that exists. The wealthy have captured it and they're somehow keeping it from the rest of us. Wealth is always created and destroyed. And it's these people that actually create the wealth. And no, I mean, I've created a lot of wealth, and I want you to go and open up a business and employ people. I want you doing as well as possible. And most of the wealthy people out there do want you to do as well as possible. Some people, though, just don't have the risk tolerance to be an entrepreneur. Some people don't have the smarts to be an entrepreneur or the instincts. But anyway, getting to the New Deal. The New Deal isn't what lifted us out of the Great Depression. It caused the Great Depression, and you can see that if you read Milton Friedman. And Milton Friedman came to the conclusion that and so did Murray Rothbard, who was, you've got a monetarist, Milton Friedman, who started the Chicago School of Economics, and Murray Rothbard, who had picked up the torch from Ludwig von Mises and was one of the best writers in support of the Austrian School of Economics. So you've got these two competing schools of economics that both said that the Federal Reserve and the U.S. government caused the Great Depression. It would have been a short-term, 1 to 2 year severe recession. 2 years at the most, but 1 to 2 year. And it was the Federal Reserve's mistakes. And, it was even admitted to, there was a dinner for Milton Friedman, and Ben Bernanke said, "You're right, it was our fault, but thanks to you, we learned our lesson and we'll never do it again." Well, guess what? They're doing it again. So Ben Bernanke acknowledged that it was the Federal Reserve's fault, and then the federal government made it very stretched out for an entire decade and made it worse by coming up with all of these programs. So the programs, the CCC, the WPA, the Civilian Conservation Corps, the Works Progress Administration, Social Security. Social Security is still around. There's some good things about it, but there's some bad things about it. But the Works Progress Administration, I love all these things. Civilian Conservation Corps. Get a bunch of young men that are unemployed, send them up into the national parks and have them build all these trails. I love those trails. I've hiked those trails, but those trails were paid for by taxes. So during a depression, they taxed productive individuals and businesses, and some of those businesses that they overtaxed went out of business and created more unemployment so that they could transfer that through the system, and all the politicians and the people that work at the IRS and the Treasury have to get paid, so they could take these men and send them up into the national parks to build these trails during a depression. I mean, how many people were hiking those trails during the depression? My favorite hotel, one of my favorite hotels in the world, is the Timberline Lodge on Mount Hood, Oregon. And this is this beautiful ski lodge built from 1936, inaugurated by Roosevelt himself in 1938. And they took all of these hobos back then, that's what they called homeless people, was hobos, put them up on a mountain and gave them a lot of work. This was one of the programs to employ people. And they built this beautiful hotel. All of the staircase banisters are carved with all these animals and stuff. So they taught people how to become wood carvers. They hand pounded all the hinges for the doors. They wove the rugs. They wove the curtains right there. They hand pounded all the nails that this place was built from. They did this with taxes that were taken from like a nail factory that was 100 times more efficient than hand pounding all of these nails. And they may have put that factory out of business to send this few hundred people up on top of a mountain to make a ski lodge for people to take a vacation and go skiing in the middle of the Great Depression. Are you kidding me? This is insanity. And this is what happens when you get government solutions to a very large problem. And when you try to take care of everybody, this is what happens. And so, and when you're talking about the conservatives chipping away at the programs and regulations that kept the banks from financially engineering themselves into trouble, they have chipped away at those programs and regulations that keep the banks from financially engineering themselves into trouble. The programs are all of these social programs. The regulation you're talking about is the Glass-Steagall Act, I believe. And yes, Citigroup was evil when they did that. That was not a socialist program. The Glass-Steagall Act, even though it came into being in 1933, I believe it was in reaction to the crash of 29. I've got a special report coming up on that everybody should watch, because there's a whole lot in there that you can learn about what's happening today. It's already happened once in the past, so watch that. It's coming up. But the Glass-Steagall was a moral act. It was something of, when the banks and the brokerage houses, the investment banking and commercial banking, you make a deposit in your bank account, and the bank can then lend out some of that to somebody that's going to build a house or buy a house. And they lend it out at a higher rate. The bank survives with that spread. They're making that interest, that arbitrage. And if you know that that's what they're doing, that is moral. If you're depositing your currency and you think it's in that account, but the bank has actually used all of that currency to go gambling in the stock market, which is what they did back in the 20s, that is immoral and should be illegal. But they don't need a lot of special laws for this. If they should be able to punish the banks for an immoral act, something that lacks integrity, and that would keep the banks from doing it again. Is just you punish them for something where there's a conflict of interest, and there was clearly a conflict of interest there, and so it separated those banks. Had nothing to do with socialism. So this sentence here, I don't see that you can really support that. I thank you, though, Dennis, for bringing all of this up, but please study all of this stuff some more. I'm really hoping that hopefully I can change your viewpoint on this, because that lens, we've all got to look at the lenses that we all see things through and understand why people have a certain viewpoint versus a different viewpoint. The meme of the day, but remember, get my book, it's free. Meme of the day: when government intervenes in an attempt to lower the cost of everything. If you've ever seen the old Muppets, this is Beaker. He was an assistant to a scientist, and his vocabulary consisted of me, 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 me. And he was hilarious. I want to thank you for watching. See you next time.